All right. Oh man, that's. There, wait 1 second. I'm 1, 2. Okay, we're good. Okay, I'm glad you're forgiving me because
Man,
you're a
don't even stress.
You're a podcasting person. Okay, we're joined by Peter Rubin today, who's the senior editor at Wired Magazine, regularly covers VR, and also wrote a book on virtual reality, and it's really about the future of changing the human connection. So future presence, how virtual reality is changing human connection is actually the title of the book. And it's about the intimacy and limits of ordinary life.
Yeah, it's a long title.
It's a long title.
It's a long one. It took me a while to even remember. Like, I couldn't even recite it for the longest time.
We're going to call it Future Presence.
Yeah, that's really the title of the book. Don't even stress the subhead.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to call it that. I'm really excited to have him on the show because he's a longtime VR believer, which at this time right now is easy to not be.
Yeah, it's a weird time. Like, because I think people who work in the industry, people who have covered the industry, have been all too aware of what's been going on behind the scenes. So you knew, or a lot of people knew, that after that first generation of headsets came out in 2016, it didn't matter how they performed. Like, whatever sales numbers there ended up being, people would declare it dead.
Completely.
Right? Because there were always going to be people who were like, oh, it's like 3D televisions. It's never going to take off. And if you really knew, you'd be like, that has nothing to do. Like, these are apples and oranges. And then there was also this other year, and everyone knows that standalone headsets are getting worked on. Maybe people had seen Oculus's Santa Cruz prototype, and so everybody knows how much better things are getting. And if you cover stuff and you go to shows or you see demos a lot, or even if you spend time in a headset, not just lobbing grenades from the sideline, you see the work that's being done in it.
I like the lobbing grenade.
It's just so easy to do.
It's so easy.
It's so easy to do.
Because the data doesn't back it up yet. Like,
right,
I mean,
right.
The headset sale, distribution. Everyone focuses on market size,
right.
And like that's not there.
And it's the thing where you are playing Mario against Ghost Mario, and it's 7 seconds ahead, and you see it, and you're chasing it. That's where VR really is, but everybody just sees the flesh and blood Mario, which is lagging behind because there's all this development and all this research that's going on behind the scenes. And so
this is, by the way, I'm not this is my favorite analogy that anyone's ever made on this podcast and in life, is the Ghost Mario.
I have to be honest with you, I have no idea if it holds together.
Hey, finish it up. Let's see if it works.
Let's see where it goes. It's not even like you're competing against yourself. The reality of the XR industry is miles ahead of what the consumer-facing reality is, right? So everybody who works in it, everybody who writes about it is aware of Ghost Mario, but everyone who complains about it is only looking at Mario, which is a weird barometer to use.
You had me at Ghost Mario because I know you're a Mario Kart player just based off of that.
Aren't we all, though?
I think we should be. I think everyone listening is nodding along going, Ghost Mario, what an amazing analogy. Like, that completely makes sense. I used to play Mario Kart, and I used to play against myself, and that was it. Okay, so now we've talked about the entire VR industry for a while. Okay, what is your background? How did you get into this, and what got you excited about virtual reality to begin with?
So I was excited about virtual reality long before virtual reality kind of came back as any sort of viable technology, way before it had solved the problem. So I fell in love with it as a teenager, right? Seeing Lawnmower Man, and then later seeing like the 13th Floor in dollar theaters, like terrible, like the worse the VR movie, the more I loved it. Mm-hmm. And, ended up reading a lot of different novels and stories that used it as a kind of a science fiction fan growing up. So I knew that side of it, and I didn't know that there was a real world counterpart to it. So like I saw Lawnmower Man as a teenager, and I didn't know that that headset and those suits were real and that
were possible,
and that a company had actually made them and they got used for this movie. So like it existed in my mind as this unbelievable fantasy sci-fi idea. I went into journalism. I became a culture writer and a culture editor. And when I came to Wired, part of what I was doing was gaming coverage, and so I would go to E3 every year. So I went to E3 in 2012, which was the first year that John Carmack showed that duct tape prototype of the Oculus Rift. I didn't see it. 2013, I went back, and my coworker had gotten a meeting with Oculus, and I was like, I'm coming with you. Saw a demo, saw the first HD prototype that they brought to that show, did it with the CEO at the time, and I went back to work. I left E3, I went back to work, and at our very first story pitch meeting, I was like, you're not going to believe me, but VR is here, and it works, and it's going to be huge.
That is awesome. So thank you for that. You were a part of the revolution.
Yeah, so that was 2013, and I ended up writing. We did a cover story in 2014 on Oculus. It had Palmer Luckey on the cover. It's a super tight close up of him, and so people made fun of it a lot at the time. But I wrote that story, and that was, I think, the first major magazine story about VR, and certainly about Oculus.
Oh, 100%. And I read that article.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we're just gonna thank each other for 20 minutes.
I'm okay with that.
That works for me.
So what was it initially? So the thing that drew you to virtual reality was this love of sci-fi. What's your favorite sci-fi book?
Oh God, I really have to say Snow Crash is up there, and also Rainbow's End, which is another one that gets more into AR but is unbelievable.
I've not
by Werner Vinge, I think.
Is Rainbow's End, and should I?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to say it's the Ready Player One, because Ready Player One has like a very specific realization of VR, but the vision of how AR and MR are going to affect society and spoofability and fraud and all the like dark side stuff comes into play really well in this book. It's incredible, incredibly prescient.
I will say there are a lot of books that focus on the sort of like dark side, like the features of the technologies are always dark side.
Right.
Same with VR. Like Ready Player One was a little like, hey, everyone's in this game all day,
right?
And then that's not good or whatever.
Yeah, these aren't the plot points. This is just the background. This is just the world that the book takes place in.
I want to see the dark world.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're going to have a choice, unfortunately. In one way or another.
Someone should take the other side and like write the hey, it's great because.
Well, that's Ready Player One for you.
And where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Indiana. I've lived in California for the past 6 or 7 years. Was in New York all my adult life before that.
And what's your favorite experience, if you're allowed to say? Are you allowed to say?
My favorite VR experience? Oh my God, I mean, it's very difficult because I've seen so many things, and the majority of them are, of course, things that everyone has access to, but increasingly the stuff that blows my mind, and not increasingly, up to a certain point, like the first time I did VR and someone else was in there, that changed everything for me, and that became how I thought about the technology, and that's what ended up leading to the book. Is VR as a shared experience unlocks this kind of incredible host of social dynamics that really changes the way we interact with each other in a digital space. We've never had the ability to have unmediated proximity in a digital environment before.
Okay, let's get in your book. What is it about?
So the 30,000 foot log line of the book, which is called Future Presence, basically says that a lot of people think about VR as gaming and education, and all these things are true and all these things are incredible, and people talk about VR as an empathy machine, and that is also true, but it doesn't go far enough, because VR's true unique property is the ability to unlock and even accelerate intimacy between people. By sharing an experience in VR, you create this moment between two people or more people, if it's a group in there, and it's quality time of a kind that we just don't experience anymore in our lives. And so at least right now, it takes the first 2 years of consumer VR and looks at how people have used it, what people have created with it, and it extrapolates from what we can do now and what's coming down the pike, and talks about what the next 5-10 years are going to look like.
So rather than saying that virtual reality is going to take us away from the human connection, you're actually saying that it's going to bring us closer.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, and all the hand wringing about VR being escapist and isolating, and that this is where I live now. Imgur meme that was all over Reddit a few years ago of just a kid huddled up in his room, like that couldn't be farther from the truth. When you put on a headset, you are not going to be by yourself. You already are not by yourself when you put on a headset. And the thing that changes is, in the early days, anyone who had like a casual, like a phone-driven mobile headset, they would put on a headset and they'd do something. They'd say, "That's amazing. What do I do next?" And they'd go to a museum and they'd say, "What's next?" And you go underwater. What's next? The thing that makes you stop saying what's next is when you're in there with other people. And then VR stops being about the novelty of the environment, and the environment becomes just the environment. It just becomes the background for what you're doing in there, what you're feeling in there, what you're experiencing in there. So it's kind of the unexplored domain of VR that I get into.
And what do you think your timeline is for that? For like this, do you think it's already happened?
Oh, it's already happening.
People are tribing up inside of virtual reality.
I mean, tribing is kind of a loaded term, right? Because that's also I can point to communities that are starting in VR and friendships and romances and even marriages that have come out of VR, and people can say, well, yeah, but people will isolate into tribes, which will replicate all the dysfunctional dynamics that a tribe, in quotes. Obviously, I know what your guys' nomenclature is. Tribe is about togetherness, and people look at tribalism as this kind of negative side. And so while we don't know for sure that that's not going to happen, what I can say is what we're seeing already with communities arising in VR, in the early days when it's not flooded with users and people have a chance to iron out the kinks and anticipate real problems and start building solutions to them before they get out of hand, is I think there's a real chance to build a system or a system of persistent worlds, social apps or whatever they are, whether they're games or other types of experiences that have built into them kind of safeguards against what happened with the internet, which grew and grew and grew and grew so fast, and everyone was prioritizing scale, and no one really thought about user experience. And so fast forward from the birth of social media to now, when it's a crisis on all fronts, from fake news to harassment, and these are all things that could taint VR, but we've already seen this movie, and it was called The Internet, and no one wants to see that again.
The CEO at Boost VC in our last tribe, there's a company called Where Thoughts Go. Lucas is the CEO there, and his pitch is essentially what the Internet did was it made it really easy for humans to connect to information, but it's really bad at connecting humans to humans. And so he's saying that the next level of technology is really going to be connecting humans to humans. So
that's absolutely right.
I think that's what that's what I'm getting from this. It's like there's this new level of connection that we actually don't really experience anymore that we're about to get back to.
That's right. And people have certainly experienced intense communication and togetherness through the internet. But what's interesting about that in particular is, obviously it was born of anonymity and the fact that people could be whatever they wanted to online, and they could curate the persona that they gave to a community, whether it was a chat room or a message board or on a date, just a text message, whatever. And if you met someone in real life that you had kind of struck up a bond with online, there was almost always this sense of, oh, the person that I'm meeting is not the person that I thought I knew online. That falls away in VR. When you're embodied as an avatar and you're moving your hands and your head, the mannerisms that you have in real life get translated into VR. So if you spend time in a multi-user VR environment and you get to know somebody and then you meet them in real life, not only are they going to sound the way they actually sound and act the way they actually act because it's in real time and you don't have a chance to kind of curate your responses the way you do when you think about a snappy response at a keyboard, but your kind of tics and your nonverbal mannerisms are going to be the same.
Yeah.
So it's this really incredible translation of a person's essence into VR and out of VR. It's the same person. We didn't really experience that with the internet being mediated the way it was because we all gave different sides of ourselves based on who we were talking to or what we wanted them to think about us.
So do you think that these communities that are being built out need to regulate in some way to make this happen, or is this just something that naturally happens when people get together?
I think it's a combination of the two. Like, I think there are natural mechanics that play out and there are natural phenomena that play out, but I think that if you want this to grow and be welcoming to all people and have communities flourish in as natural and free a way as possible, there is going to need to be, in some sense, some sort of regulatory approach. And I don't know what that means exactly. One very easy non-conventionally regulatory approach is, and again, and this was something that was actually in Ready Player One and is in a lot of thinking about VR, that every world is going to have its own social contract. So if you want to take part in this world, you got to agree to this code of conduct.
Yeah.
No strikes.
And do you think that it's the service that actually provides that, or is it the community that self-regulates?
I think there's going to be both. I think that in the establishment of some of these worlds, it's going to be set out by the developers, but I think user-generated worlds and content are going to be such a huge part of the growth of XR that a lot of it is going to be self-established and self-policing. So we are going to have, I think, and this is one way that tribal is a good thing, is I think we are going to have a number of communities where it's almost like a council of elders, or you have these other kind of tribal structures that help keep the peace. But I think also if someone wants just a pure anarchic troll fest, they'll be able to find that.
There will always be a troll fest.
Yeah, but the key is going to be keeping that confined to where it's supposed to be.
And choice, probably, yeah.
And choice. Like I think if people haven't spent time embodied in VR, it's hard to understand this. But something that seems tossed off through social media online in kind of these mediated ways, whether it's kind of tossing an insult or a slur at someone or sending them an image, when you can walk up to someone and invade their personal space in VR, it's just the viscerality of that amplifies the impact of it a thousandfold, a millionfold. And so there's a real kind of psychological impact that trollish behavior can have in VR. And some people are like having their fun with it in the early days of VR chat. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that you didn't have to be in VR to be in VR chat. So you had people coming in that were doing it from a mouse and keyboard behind a PC, and they could enact all the same things that were hilarious to them when they were streaming anything else, not thinking about the effect that it has on people in VR. So I think a lot of it is going to be making sure that VR is a VR space.
And I think VR is also, to that point actually, when you are actually face-to-face with someone, because that's something that the internet doesn't allow, like there's this, it's like writing on the bathroom stall, you know, like people don't know who they're actually like writing about or to. But with VR, like you're literally looking the person in the eyes. It's harder to be like mean.
It's way harder. It's like, and this is a really terrible metaphor, but it's a lot easier, they say, not from personal experience, it's a lot easier to shoot a gun than it is to stab someone. Meaning when you are right there with a person, inflicting harm on that person, whether it's just verbal or anything else, you're accountable in VR and you feel accountable. Like you are part of this physical dynamic between two people. And it takes a special kind of sociopath, right, to be able to break the social contract that way.
Completely. While you're talking, I've been looking at my finger because I was just in VR for like an hour and 40 minutes, and I think I have a blister.
Occupational hazards.
I was like, I think, and I'm like, what? Why is this happening? Okay, so I actually, while you're here, I actually wanted to ask you one or two questions about so VR companies out there, okay, I'd say a fair number are listening right now. What should they be thinking about in relationship to like the stories that are going on in the press right now? Like, what is the like core? What's the core theme that they should be sort of? What's interesting to the media? What's interesting, and how should they communicate with the media?
Man, what's interesting to the media is always the worst stuff,
Oh,
right? Because
I agree.
especially with a technology like VR, AR, MR, or just XR, because the numbers of the daily users are low enough that nothing is going to resonate, media outlets assume, unless it's terrible or scandalous. So this is why harassment stories come out, and harassment is a very real problem in the early days of VR, and it's one of those things that needs to be solved.
So it's only the negative stuff.
But
that
it's
gets
only the
hit.
negative stuff, and it's
Because
sales
all-
failures.
Oh my gosh.
So Wired does a lot of both, and I'm proud that we find use cases that say something about the next wave of headsets and experiences. And so we're always looking not at the now, but we're looking at like, what does this particular thing mean for the next 2-3 years of the growth of this technology? Because there's nothing but growth. There's the pace at which the growth is going to happen, but the horse is out of the barn. There is no failure of XR at this point. It's a matter of when, and it's a matter of kind of how. Is it going to be Apple all-in-one magical device that makes it a culturally ubiquitous thing. Is that going to happen before that, or is it going to happen after that? It's going to happen. We just don't know when. And treating it that way, rather than trying to poke holes in it and saying it doesn't matter, it's a fad. It's not a fad, clearly. And it's weird. I have to say it's weird because you and I were talking about this before we started recording. It feels a little strange to be pro VR these days, right? Because you feel like any sort of optimism around any sort of technology is very kind of out of fashion.
Which is why I'm so excited to talk to you. Like, I just other than the entrepreneurs, I just want to find other people.
Yeah, right? I mean, I kind of feel that way too. And that's not to say that there aren't real problems. But the problems are a function of the growth rather than a function of the technology itself. 100%. I mean, it's misuse of the promise of the technology for sure. And so as far as, for creators, whether hardware or software, I think that saying we can bring you to the beaches of Hawaii or we can take people to a museum, that's all well and good, but it doesn't change anything. These are all kind of variations on the same experiences that have been around from day one. I'm more interested in how does this enable connection between people? How does this give people not just an experience in a headset that they can't have otherwise, but can change their life outside the headset in a way that people don't necessarily anticipate.
So is the world that you're trying to paint of the future, it's more connected, which I like. Is it that I'm in headset all day?
No. I mean, I think that we're certainly working towards some sort of a combined wearable device that'll be more ever present, but I think that a fairly popular line of thinking, and I subscribe to this as well, is as mixed reality and occlusive virtual reality kind of come together into a single device whenever that happens, I think they'll have such different use cases that you might be wearing something a lot of the day, but it's going to be a pair of glasses and you will be seeing through it for the vast majority of your day. Mm-hmm. You will, like, when you're in private, when you're at home, there will be use cases for conventional immersion. VR as we know it now, for immersive, occlusive things, but it's going to be a combination of those two. I think we're going to become much more used to having virtual objects in our real world surroundings. That's going to be how we do our work. I mean, certainly we'll be working in VR and working in MR, kind of arriving.
I'm picturing a lot of like pranks where people leave like 3D coffee cups or things, and you like think it's real, and then it's not real.
So yes, a joke, but at the same time, we talk about verifying identities a lot online. Mm-hmm. What we're not talking about yet, and we'll need to be talking about, is authenticating experiences as well as identities. Because after a certain point, when virtual objects have a solidity and a persistence that makes them impossible to distinguish whether or not it's real until you get up and poke at it, there's going to be a need to designate things as virtual. There just is. And whether that's in some sort of shading or whether that's kind of augmented overlay, designating virtual things as virtual. And again, this is past VR as a technology. Right? But when we're all experiencing mixed reality, there is going to need to be some sort of regulatory approach to authenticating virtual things as virtual.
Yeah, I think that we're in this is my personal opinion, I think we as a generation are this bridge technology generation where it's like we knew the world without phones, we sort of saw what the computer could do, we saw this powerful thing, but the future generations are going to understand the fourth dimension. Like, they're going to understand what living inside of a computer looks like rather than just viewing it through a window.
The way there's always videos of babies with a magazine trying to swipe a page or tap a page instead of turning the page because they know tablets. Yeah. Right? There's going to be a generation of kids that grows up getting used to a different set of navigation and interface skills.
I mean, Alexa, like I have a 3-year-old, and like Alexa is a family member now, and that's going to be wild to grow with, like a wild concept.
And when Alexa becomes embodied, right? When Alexa becomes someone you can see and talk to, that's a whole other wrinkle to that.
Well, I want before we go on the lightning round, which is a thing, I want you to be able to talk about, is there anything else you wanted to cover about your book? Because I'm really excited about reading it, and it is going to be on my nightstand now.
That's great to hear. Thank you. The thing like coming out with this book has been a really interesting process for me because I took pains to make sure the XR community knew about it. But at the same time, it's for people who have no idea anything about VR. Like the thing that came out of it in the early days when I started getting feedback from people who work in XR is, this is the book I'm going to give my relatives to answer what I do and why I do it.
Oh, that's perfect. We have like a little library over here of that type of book. For other things. We need to do that.
Yeah,
we need by like 10 of them.
I love it.
Okay,
it's 100% geared at a general audience, but it's not dumbed down. I like to think. I mean, it is by nature of it being me, the person who wrote it, so it is dumbed down. But it's supposed to be as much a travelogue as anything else. So it's really conversational. It takes people through a bunch of virtual experiences. It talks to the people who made them. It talks to the people who use them. And it starts kind of with our relationship with ourselves and talks about how VR can make us more mindful and more kind of tranquil. And it goes out from there. So it starts talking about our relationships with stories, our relationships with other people, friendship, romance, sex, marriage, etc. So it starts small and it goes very big over the course of the book.
That's really exciting. Oh, okay. So we're gonna go to lightning round. And lightning round is lightning round.
Lightning round.
Okay.
Is Ted Nugent here?
I need noises. I need to be able to press a button.
That really it demands a power chord of some sort.
Yeah, it's like okay. Pizza or hamburgers?
Pizza.
Okay. And what toppings?
God, it really depends on the place. Like, are we talking? It depends what
city.
city.
You're a locational eater.
Well,
okay.
well, I mean,
geography matters.
Well, a New York pie and a Detroit pie and L.A. Well, not L.A. Let's scratch L.A. Chicago. Every place deserves a different thing.
I do think. Comparing like Chicago and even San Francisco, like way different pies.
Yeah, in San Francisco, are you going to go with one of the millions of places that does sourdough crust, or are you going to find like the very few places that don't?
I'm a round table man, so.
Oh, excellent.
Straight up. Actually, I made pizza with my family last night. It's awesome.
Big fan of making pizza. We got a stone in the oven.
It's not like that hard.
No,
I thought it was really difficult.
And if you get the dough from a pizza place, then you don't even have to worry about proofing the yeast and doing that whole thing. You just start with the dough, and then you can make your own.
Yeah,
it's way
exactly.
easier.
Trader Joe's sells the dough.
There you go.
Okay, what's a skill you have that you take pride in?
Freestyle rapping.
You can rap?
Oh, hell yeah. I used to.
Okay, well,
like,
can I put you on the spot
no.
right now?
I shouldn't have answered that.
Well, okay. It could be about pizza and hamburgers.
It could be.
Okay.
Also, puns. Puns is it's an adjunct.
That's a derivative.
Exactly.
Of the rap.
Yeah.
Of the rapping, the bars of rapping. Okay, if you could have a dinner with any two people throughout history, who are those two people?
That's supposed to be a lightning round question?
These are all lightning round questions.
Oh my God.
People are always like, these are the hard ones.
That is like that's not a fair question.
Everyone has this management of expectation when they come in here. They're like, yeah, okay, yes or no. But
pizza versus burgers are like hidden talents.
Then I go super deep.
God. All right, let me try to think about this. It would have to be someone from the past and someone from the now, because part of that interplay has to be showing someone what is now and having them respond without knowledge of the problems or the benefits that it has.
Ooh, that's
right?
Interesting. Sort of like having a juxtaposition of hey, I thought the world was going to move this way.
Right.
Did it?
Right. And that's one thing. But then I feel like the people should also have some sort of philosophical, fundamental philosophical disagreement. I don't know how you're going to come up with two people that embody those two things, but I feel like you have to have, who is the most unbelievable, polymath of today? Like, who does everything?
Like, are you talking about like Bezos, or are you talking about some athlete or someone who embodies today?
More like a Bezos, but someone who is like a Bill Gates, someone who knows a lot about a lot of things, because not only are they kind of brilliant intellectually, but they read voraciously and they're always curious. So like a Bill Gates and a
like Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, but that feels a little samey. I want there to be a gap in life experience as well. Like C.J. Walker, like the first black female millionaire from the 20s, and Bill Gates, right? I want there to be some commonality and some total rift.
Oh, wow. Those are two.
I don't even know if that's my official answer, but I'm in love with it right now. So say C.J. Walker and Bill Gates.
Hey, we got there. if there was a movie made about your life, what actor would you have play you?
Oh man, I used to get stopped in restaurants because people thought I was Chris Daughtry, the kid who won or was runner-up on American Idol. Stanley, I'll wait a few years and make a Stanley Tucci.
Okay.
That's my style icon right there.
I like that.
The Tooch.
What is... well, I guess I was going to ask you what was a recent book that you read other than your book.
Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff, I think is a novelist's name, and it's being adapted into an HBO series. Jordan Peele bought the rights to it, and it is being... the showrunner is a woman named Misha Green, who did the show Underground on WGN, which was about the Underground Railroad. But this is an incredible novel that's set in post-World War II America between the North and it takes place mostly in Chicago, but it's kind of spooky, and there's fantasy and horror elements, and it's also a story about race in America. It's great.
Well, Jordan Peele is very talented.
He knew what he was doing buying that book too, or buying the rights to the book.
Liam Neeson's though.
A few years ago, after the first season of Key and Peele, I got to interview them at Comic-Con for a video.
You did?
Yeah, and so we were on camera, and I asked each of them what their favorite sketch from the first season was, and they both gave an answer. I was like, "I'm sorry, you're both wrong. The answer is Liam Neeson's."
It's literally Neeson's though.
Yeah, it's Liam Neeson.
They just did another one for the what's his name? Bruce Willie is getting roasted.
B. Willie
though. He said, "You know who else I like?" But it's really good. The promo for the roast of Bruce Willis.
Excellent.
Okay. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Invisibility or teleport. Invisibility or teleport.
I mean, you have to weigh the pros and cons, probably.
Teleport. I think invisibility speaks to an insecurity that I'm not proud that I have. You just want to be around to see what people say about you when you're not there. Same as mind reading, right? Teleport, because it's about convenience rather than...
And VR. It makes sense.
And it makes
for VR.
sense.
VR is teleportation.
There it is.
What is your definition of success?
Never forgetting that you haven't finished.
I love it. Thank you for being on the Boost VC podcast. And this is going to be awesome. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Adam.